Hey people, how's everybody doing? So this is the day that we're going to be talking to you guys. We're going to be bringing a little bit of light to this very interesting and disturbing at the same time topic that everybody is going through right now. And for this talk, today we're going to receive Professors Richard Halty and Saul Simeon, who kindly accepted to bring their knowledge and answer some of the questions that are still unanswered. And I'm pretty sure that there are going to be a lot of interesting topics and a lot of questions that the general public is not 100% sure about, especially on the COVID topic, what we're going to be talking about today. And you're going to have the opportunity as well to send us some questions. And I'm going to get Rich and Saul to answer these questions for you. So first of all, gentlemen, good morning. Good morning, Richard. Good morning, Saul. How are you guys doing?
Good morning, Junior. Nice to meet you. How is everything with you?
Good, great. Everything is great. How about you, Saul? How are you?
Good morning. I'm all right. Okay. Greetings to all friends and everybody around, which has the patience to listen to us today.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of interesting questions here. So, I don't want to go around too much, gentlemen. So I'm just going to go straight to the point, okay? And Rich, I would like to start asking you a question. It's a very general question, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of people want to know that the situation in Brazil is really complicated at the moment. In terms of COVID, like the situation in Brazil. In other words, it's a little bit of a mess. I believe in terms of the COVID-19, only the United States can be compared to us in this negative scenario that we're going through. I believe we are reaching around 2 million cases today, as of today, and we've gone over 70,000 deaths only in this country that we know of. Of course, we also have to highlight that. So, Rich, what is it that we are doing wrong, or what is it that we are not doing right? Can you give us a little bit of your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Junior, for the question. Well, we have some points that we should address. I think that probably the measures that we are taking to avoid the spread of the COVID-19, perhaps they're not being so effective. For example, one thing that we should take care is about the social distance. And when we follow the results of the social distance among all the cities, we can see that this measure is not as effective as it should be. For example, we expect that the social distance should be around 60 or 70%. And nowadays, our social distance could come from 30, 35 to 40%. So it's not efficient. So perhaps if we can focus on this, perhaps we can try to decrease this number of infected people. Moreover, I think one important thing that is World Health Organization says that it's important to do is testing people, because we have to test people and so that we can see that the person is with the disease, and so that we can put him at home without having contact with other guys. So perhaps if we could increase the number of testing, this could make some difference. What we have now, we are not having a very high number of testing every day. So that could be one of the factors that's influencing the measures. And another thing that I think it's an important matter is the financial question, because we know that people, most of them, they depend on their salaries, and for them to stay at home, we need financial support for the companies to be able to close their doors. We have the people being able to survive even though they're not getting their money from their jobs. So I think financial support would be very important at this time. So we have to combine health strategies together with financial strategies.
Okay, that's very interesting, Rich, because of course, we've been talking about social distancing for quite a while now, and but we cannot simply neglect what you said after, right? I mean, we're part of a big system, and the economy is actually a system, and someone has to pay the bill, correct? And it's important, as you said, and I think it was great. The fact that we're not looking at only one thing to do. You highlighted very clearly three important things, and they are all connected to each other. And I think, yeah, I think that was great. So I have a question for you. Once again, thank you very much for participating with us. And as an epidemiologist that you are, so I want to ask a question more towards the World Health Organization, because I know you are you are aware of what they're doing, and you, of course, you do follow quite a lot about their protocol and everything. But we know that the WHO declared the COVID-19 a global pandemic. Um, it's a little bit of what I just asked Richard, but in terms of protecting ourselves from the virus, protecting not only myself but other people too, because of course it's what I'm going to say now. It's obvious we cannot see the virus. It's they're very tiny things, but we know they're there because they're causing all this damage. But um, a lot of people have been talking about masks and that kind of stuff and social distancing, but when I do wear masks and I apply the social distancing, do I protect myself 100 and other people 100% from the virus? How does that work?
Well, thanks for the question, Junior. First of all, let me make clear one thing. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm a parasitologist that has a lot of interest in epidemiology of infectious diseases. Um, Answering to your question and going away a little bit in the same line from Richard, we could in fact roll here a lot of factors that influence this spread and the appearance so drastic of this pandemic. Let me tell you, I think first of all that the approach we did about this pandemic was wrong, and I'm talking worldwide wrong, because we need to be humble, and if we're not humble, we cannot fight the virus. The virus has to so we can win this battle. We have to be together, and this is the message that the World Health Organization has been all the time trying to pass. But it seems that some people are neglecting this situation since the beginning. There is negationism, and also there is an approach which is not proper to fight this pandemic. It's an approach that, you see, the virus is not a person. It's an identity, not even a being. It's a compound. It's a molecular compound. So he has no soul. He has no thinking. He has no club. He has no party. He has no feelings. So you do not gain anything to mask things. You do not gain anything to try to lie or try to avoid in a certain, with some masquerades like we did social every day and politically. So what the virus wants is to survive and to spread. What he wants is to find a cell where he can replicate and do damage. That's what he wants. And that's why we need to be together to fight it. And this has been, to my knowledge, has been the big mistake we have made. Now, it is not a very complicated virus, plus that it belongs to a family of viruses we know already some time ago. There are at least 7 different coronavirus of this type, and we're calling here in virology, this is a beta coronavirus, and it belongs, it's a simple virus. Its morphology is not that difficult to fight. Imagine, for example, that just cleaning hands with soap is enough, for example, to kill the virus when it is in our hands. So it's not complicated virus in this sense, like we say, but it has really, it's a very high contamination rate. It propagates very easily through droplets in the air. So we know that. So what we have to do, there are 3 things, basic things that we really have to do. First, we have to be apart of each other at least 1.5 meters, like 2 meters, like we say, to avoid that the droplets with the virus could get into our mucous. And like we say, in the conjunctive, in the eye, in the nose, as well as in the upper respiratory system. That's where it can enter our body. So the thing is to avoid that, and we can avoid that by social distancing. This means 2 meters from apart of each other, plus the use of masks. Use of masks is very important because, like this also, if you are infected or not, this will always help not to spread and not to gain the virus. And these, I would say, that are the most important things. Use masks, clean hands with alcohol, and of course, social distancing.
I have just a question on top of that, Saul. So you have just mentioned that technically speaking, the virus is not so hard. It's quite a simple virus. So does that mean that the biggest problem with the pandemic really lied on our approach, the countries across the world approach towards the country? Is that what you're saying?
No, listen, Junior. Well, when I say it's easy, it is an easy virus. It's not that quite so. I mean, for example, if we would really go into it, I could tell you, for example, it has 29 proteins on its surface, and some of them we don't even know what they do. So it's quite simple in a certain way of speaking. But let me tell you the following: that imagine this virus is writing his history, like somebody said. And in fact, if we people wouldn't have done anything, he would go forward, replicating himself till 70% of people all over the world will be in touch with the virus. This means with the rate of 1% deaths that we would have like something like 60 million people dead, and then the virus would be gone. This is what some countries try to strategy as the herd immunity. So this herd immunity that Sweden, for example, tried to follow, as well as Great Britain in the beginning, and in a certain way, the authorities in Brazil also thought it would be possible. So we would lose 60 million people, but the virus would pass through, getting this 70% of the population. Don't forget, this is a big, huge mistake for some reasons. First of all, because in these 60 million people, you cannot forget that will be at least 10 to 15% medical personnel. And this means 5 to 7 million doctors and nurses who die. And they are so needed, not in just this one pandemic, but in other situations. Second of all, health systems would collapse, like we observed in some regions already. And this collapsing would bring the number of deaths to a toll very higher in certain aspects, especially in cardiovascular diseases. So this herd immunity strategy, it seems, doesn't work. Plus that we know now by scientific productions that the level of herd immunity that, for example, Sweden got with this strategy is not much than 10%. So it doesn't seem to be a good strategy. So the only weapon we have is social distancing. And to do that, we really need the help of everybody. We need to be together. We need to have a different approach, humbleness. We need to look at the virus as an enemy, but we just can fight it together. And we have to have patience. I see that many countries now opening are losing the patience. The people is losing the patience to wait. We have to wait, we have to go forward, and we have to be restive. Humbleness, restiveness, and patience. That's what we need.
As you were talking, a very famous saying came to my mind, and it says that all things will come to pass. And it's definitely true with the virus as well. And I mean, we have seen a lot of positive things as well during this pandemic, because in Brazil, especially, the biggest number of people who actually got in contact with the virus actually recovered from the COVID. A small percentage actually developed these severe symptoms. But I don't want to talk about that right now. I'm going to talk about this in a second. But I would like to ask Richard a question. Richard, my question to you is, um, Richard, are you there? Maybe having internet problems, maybe?
Yes, no.
Rich? Yes, okay, Rich. Okay, very nice. Um, Richard, the protocol for symptoms has changed so much in the last ever since the beginning of the pandemic, right? Like we've seen on TV, I've seen on TV, and I can tell you that it confuses me so much. Every time I look at I watch television, and I see, like, if I'm feeling the symptoms, some types of symptoms, I should go straight away to the hospital. But at the same time, the next day we see that if you're feeling some symptoms, just stay home. If you're okay enough, just don't leave home. I mean, you are a doctor, and you are seeing this from the inside. Like, what should people do if they're not feeling well? Like, should they simply go to the hospital right away? What should people do? Do you agree with me that this is very confusing? Like, what should people do?
Well, Junior, this is a very important question because most of the time people became worried of what they should do. So the idea is if you're feeling something like cough and fever, I mean, this is a very high probability. There's a very high probability of you to have COVID-19. So because of the fact you can be infected in the hospital, if you are fine, if you're just not feeling with this, I mean, with a lack of breath, so you can stay at home and isolated from the other guys. I mean, it's very important to keep the social distance, washing your hands, not eating with the same plate and fork and knives. I mean, using just your own your personal things in order to avoid spreading the disease for the other guys living with you. But if you are feeling lack of air, I mean, if you are with dyspnea, I mean, you're becoming tired of breathe, of getting breathe. So it's very important to go to the hospital because if you delay this time to go to the hospital, you can be in a worse situation regarding oxygenation, and this could bring you more rapid to the ICU. So if you are feeling tired and you're feeling hard to breathe, so it's very important for you to go to the hospital. It's very important also to say that the symptoms could vary. So you can be totally asymptomatic, I mean, feeling nothing at all, but you can also feel, for example, lack of the smelling. So this lack of smelling is very important because some studies they show that there are some receptors in the nose where you have related to smell that could be an entrance for the virus, and perhaps these receptors could be in other organs of your body. So the loss of smelling is very important. Sometimes you can have headache, sometimes you can have diarrhea. So the most frequent symptoms are cough and fever, but also you can have other things. So to sum up, what we can do, if you're feeling well, despite the fact you're having cough and fever, you can stay at home, take care of yourself, try to not be in touch with the other guys, try to be isolated, try to use your personal things in order to avoid spreading the disease. But if you're feeling lack of breath, if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling with difficulties to breathe, so it's very important to go to the hospital. And remember that you can feel other things, so diarrhea, your body could be aching in many parts. It's almost very similar to a flu, but you just have to be have the attention to the symptom of lack of breath or difficulties in breathing. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your answer, Richard. It's interesting as well because as you were talking, I was just paying attention and listening, and it's very funny in a way that that it all boils down to social distancing, right? It's a good idea that we do practice the social distancing. If we do not have any symptoms at all, and but social distancing does not disappear when we, of course, when people present some types of symptoms. So it seems to be like the best way to prevent and also to stop the spread of the virus, right? Is that a fair statement? Like social distancing um, is really the starting point and perhaps the most efficient action that people can take to stop the spread and to not get contaminated. Is that a fair statement to you?
Can you repeat, Junior? I didn't understand what you said, please.
Okay, sure. I said that when I was listening to you, the your speech, and when I also listened to Saul, you both highlighted the importance of social distancing. Um, in normal situations when the person does not have the virus, but also after, if the person feels some any types of symptoms, really. So it seems to me that social distancing is the answers a lot of questions in terms of not only not contracting the virus, but also spreading. It's to stop the spreading of the virus. Is there a fair statement like social distancing is one of the most effective and efficient things to stop to control this pandemic?
Yes, there I would put Saul also to comment together with me. But the importance of the social distance and mask use is that because the spread of the virus is done mainly by droplets from what you when you breathe, when you talk, when you sneeze, when you cough. So if it's a respiratory virus, I mean the most important thing is to protect ourselves from getting these viruses from these droplets and aerosols that are being produced by people. So that's why it's important for us to be in a distance with other guys, because we have some works that shows that when we're talking or when you cough or when you sneeze, I mean the viruses, they can go, for example, in the first time, I mean the first moment when you're producing the droplets, they can go like almost 2 meters from you. So that's why we have this distance. And then the other thing that people are discussing is that we have smaller particles like the aerosols. Then they can continue to move in the air. So that's why there's a question about, mainly in the hospitals and in places where you have procedures in the airways of people with COVID-19, that eventually you can have a transmission by air. So
Yeah.
if we have something that is spread by the air, by droplets that when you talk and when you breathe and when you sing and when you say something, and it can be spread. So that's the idea. If you can prevent this, it would be nice. So you use mask to block it. I mean, it is not complete. I mean, you are not avoiding them to be produced, but you are decreasing the length of the spread. Instead of they going like 2 meters, they're going to be lesser. And if you are 2 meters apart from the other guy, it's another way of preventing it. So because it has respiratory spread, so you have to take care of this. But also, one thing that is very important is that when you have the virus, for example, the virus can be on surfaces. For example, when you cough or when you sneeze or when you talk, and those droplets could stay on surfaces like on the paper, on the doors, on the tables. So the other thing is that you have to all the time wash your hands or put alcohol 70 degrees. Why? Because the big problem is when you touch these surfaces, contaminate yourself, usually your hands, and then you put your hands on your mouth or your nose or your eyes, because those regions are regions where the virus can enter your body. So that's the idea of all the time. Even though we are taking care, you are not trying to stay in a good distance from the other guy. So we don't know. Sometimes the droplet is there and we cannot see it. So that's why every time you have to wash your hands, and wash your hands, usually before you put on your eyes or on your face in a general manner. I don't know if Saul would like to ask to complement our talk.
Yeah. So, do you have anything to say on top of that?
No, I think you said everything. The only thing I want to say is, in fact, this is all new to us. And sometimes I see that we really have no patience, at least because now it's passing 6 months. And if we look backwards, we can see that never in the world humankind saw so many information about the disease
Yeah.
and
This is interesting.
the scary disease, in fact. And this has brought two things, a positive and a negative one. The positive one, of course, is that you give importance to scientists and knowledge comes through and everybody. It is interesting that even in the street, people know what a virus is. People know what a virus is. People knows what is to put down the curve. That's very important. We didn't know nothing about this before. So this is something great that happened. But on the other hand, too much information sometimes brings confusion in the head of people, a lot of confusion. And you see, people also sometimes have no patience to understand that authorities like the WHO or others or scientists, they don't know almost anything also. They study all the time. So imagine, for example, we all want to finish with this. But we know that to finish with this, there is just one way, two ways, in fact. Or we leave the virus alone to his work, and he gets the 70% of herd immunity, and it kills 60 million people. We can do this just directly for the virus. Probably will die under 10 million, okay, and then we are rid of it, we get rid of it, or we have to wait for a vaccine. That's the only thing, the only way. Another thing would be a medicine. To date, there are no medicines proved to do almost anything. We have only one which is proved to improve last 5 days in the intensive care, which is remdesivir, but that for sure Richard can answer much better than I. So, what is the weapon we have? Only social distancing. And even here, there are very contradictory things. Imagine, you remember, for example, in the beginning, we thought that the virus is very heavy and we thought it would drop straight away in the floor. Now we know by Japanese studies that, and also in Spain, we know that the virus can be around a long time in the air. So And also that air conditioning can be very bad because it can spread the virus along the space. So it's good is to open windows, open as much windows as possible, and try to get 2 meters apart from each other. That's the most important situation to do. So that's it. We are learning still learning.
Okay. There's a question here, Rich, and people, I want to encourage everybody to ask questions. If you guys have a questions to Professor Rich and Professor Saul, just write your questions, and I'll be passing it over to them. There's an interesting question here, and I've seen this on television a few times. Could the asymptomatic patient have a relapse in the future? So from what I understand, this question has to do with a person who has the virus but is asymptomatic. Can this person catch the virus again, get rid of the virus, and catch it again in the future? How does that work? I mean, there's a lot of discussion on that, right?
Well, this is a very important question because we have to take care. Because when you say about asymptomatic patient, it's very important to know if this guy is he still asymptomatic, and in the next few days he's going to present the symptoms. So this is one important thing, because despite the fact the majority of the people would have the symptoms in the first week, like from the third to the fifth day, we still have people having symptoms after 14 days. So the great thing is that when we're talking about a symptomatic patient, we have to take care and be sure if that it's going to be really asymptomatic without any symptom during these 14 days, or it's a patient who is still asymptomatic, but he's going to be symptomatic shortly. But this is a very good question, because actually we don't know. There are, in some studies, when we see in literature, we know that we have reports from like 15 to 20% of people, or 21% of people being totally asymptomatic. And the great question is, how is the body defense? Did this guy had enough antibodies to protect him against the virus again? We have some studies that are showing that perhaps the body defense against this virus is not made in the mostly by antibodies. That perhaps you can have defenses done by cells, and perhaps we cannot measure with how can I say, with too much precision, the amount of protection that somebody has got after the infection. So this is a very good question. We are not sure that if the guy can get the disease again. One thing that's very important to know is that when you got a flu, we can get a flu another time. And when you do a flu vaccine, we do vaccines every year. So this is a very new disease, and we really don't know exactly what's going on. So the idea is, despite the fact you are asymptomatic, despite the fact that you can have antibodies in the exams, the best thing that you can do is take care, continuing taking care, because we really don't know actually what's going on.
Okay, from what I understand, virus can mutate from year to year, right? And Saul had said before that the COVID virus has other has shows itself in different versions as well. So this is perhaps why, Richard, it's important for the person to be taken care of, because of this characteristic of virus that they can mutate, and that is why we have to take the flu shot year after year to protect ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yes, for sure. This is a very important thing, because mutation is one. It's another thing that would cause this necessity of new immunizations, and we are having now in some places. I think in Kazakhstan, there's a new kind of flu that they are studying to see if it's still a mutation of the SARS-CoV-2 or is it a new disease. So we are still learning, and we are still understanding what's going on, because we cannot say with strong evidence if we can get this disease again or not. The better thing is to take care, and even we have had the disease, it's better to continue taking care and using masks and staying with a social distance.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for this clarification, Richard. So there's a question here for you that I'm going to ask you in a second. But before this question, I would like to ask you. Well, there's a two-in-one here that I'd like you to give your views on that. Well, you are a Portuguese man. You're native of Portugal, and I'm pretty sure you know. Despite the fact that you live in Brazil now and you're a professor in Brazil, I'm pretty sure you have a lot of information of what's going on in Portugal and also in Europe. But my question lies a little bit on that, and it's how well prepared for the pandemic is Brazil, and what makes a country better prepared? And in terms of numbers, what can we expect for the next few months in terms of number of cases? And we cannot avoid talking about deaths. Like, when is this going to stop? It's the question that everybody wants to know. Like, what are your thoughts? How do you envision this for the next few months?
Well, thanks for the question. That's a $1 million question. But, well, I will just tell you my opinion. Well, first of all, our country is prepared for this. Well, amazingly, Brazil, as I know it now, I'm living here now for almost 10 years, is an asymmetric country, very much asymmetric. First of all, is a continental country. This means you have loads of countries inside it, so from north to south. So all the picture of the pandemics is different in the north from the south completely. But let me tell you something. I was amazed. Brazil has a wonderful health system, public health system named the SUS. Really wonderful. Many people maybe not know, especially foreigners, and think that this is contradictory, but it's the truth. This is a very positive thing. For example, there are a kind of people named community agents, which are present in every community in the most distant part of the country, which could be activated to fight this pandemic, and since the beginning wasn't. And that was, to my view, a big mistake, a huge mistake. So there is a great system, but the system is not working like it should be. Second thing, which is very important, we cannot forget that this pandemic is, of course, going especially to punish the most poor people. And that's another problem in Brazil. We know now from IBGA statistics that 65 million people doesn't have sanity, sewage. They don't have it. Point. That's too much in an universe of 210 million. Another thing which is important, 35 million people don't have access to water. So how can we say to these people, you have to wash your hands all the time if they don't have water? It is unbelievable, because Brazil is the country who has the hugest amount of sweet water in the world and the better water. So this is unexplained. To tell you now what we can wait for, well, I can tell you the following, which I think it was proven. Since the beginning of the pandemic, there was an extraordinary work made by some of the best epidemiologists of all over the world, which is the Imperial College. The Imperial College made a huge statistical study for each country, and among those countries, there was also Brazil. So in the beginning, if Brazil wouldn't have done at all any social distancing and followed the herd immunity strategy, then we would have here some millions of deaths. This means that 1% of the population would have died for sure. But Brazil did something. In fact, could have done much better, because in Brazil the pandemic came after Europe. So we could have learned with the experience from Europe, from Asia, and we could have done better. But nevertheless, there was still some people who did some social distancing. There were a few lockdowns. Well, they were not proper done. Also, the culture here is very much important. Who knows? Brazilian people, it's people who need to be close to each other, need to hug each other, need to kiss each other. It's very difficult to say to people straight away, look, there is an invisible thing here, and now we cannot kiss, we cannot embrace. That's very difficult. And this message didn't pass. So due to the fact that we had some social distancing, now we could at least have less nefast consequences than we have. So the number of deaths is very high, of course. 70,000 deaths at this moment is a lot of people, but still could have been much worse. So it is all depending of this social distancing. And I think if we keep up doing this social distancing in some places, and we're still in time to do a lot of things, as I told you before, Junior, people need to realize that this virus has no political party, has no club, has no soul. He wants to infect cells. He wants to get into receptors, AC2 receptors. That's what he wants to do, to replicate and to do damage. So we have to be together into this. This is not a small flu. This is a completely very hard situation, especially for those who need to work, who need to be exposed, who need to make money to it. They not can stay at home, you see. So we have to protect these people. We have to be united. If we are united, we can go out, we can do our normal life, but maintaining social distancing as possible. And sometimes even have to make some measures like lockdown if necessary to avoid the focus to spread, because that's what it's about. We have to test a lot, find the spots where the infections are, and to put them in isolation so they don't spread more. That's what has to be done.
Thank you very much. So we're going to talk about this unity within the country in a second, and it's definitely something that we have seen in other places. In my opinion, anyways, a little bit more than what we've seen in Brazil. But there are two questions here, so about the vaccines that I'd like to ask directly to you as a parasitologist, not an epidemiologist that you are. The two questions, I believe they can be asked together. The first question that one of the people watching the live sent was, is it possible that the COVID mutates to a point that a vaccine becomes ineffective in a given period of time? And the second question on top of that, if you could answer to, what are the differences in the types of vaccines? Like, how does that work? Like, yes, the question is here. What are the differences between the different types of the vaccines for the COVID? Can you give your thoughts? Can you talk a little bit about that? So
yeah, yes. Thanks for the question, Alexandre de Brito, and Gustavo also, an actor Gustavo, a friend of mine, big Benfica fan. Send my greetings here. Well, let me see the following. First of all, talking about the mutation, of course it is possible. Listen, we know already that this virus had already 4 mutations. It's not much, because it's an RNA virus. If it would be a DNA virus, it would be worse. We would have 2 problems. First, DNA virus, they stay in the body, they don't go out. And RNA virus, they have this, at least, let me say, good thing, that they just replicate and go out again, looking for another host. Second thing is that mutations in RNA virus are much less. Well, but we are already in the 4th mutation. And this is one of the explanations scientists sometimes say, why numbers in China were not so high like they should be theoretically. Well, of course, there is always the conspiration theory, and I don't want to go that way. Of course, we know China is a dictatorial system, and probably we didn't know all about what happened in there. But nevertheless, it is we should emphasize that the fact that a mutation occurred was very important, and the mutation was that earlier this coronavirus spikes, which is the antigenic determinant of this virus, the spike S, they were easily got, they would get easily attached. They were very weakly attached to the surface, to the envelope of the virus. And this would explain why a virus that jumped from an animal to a person, why it couldn't be so successful in the new host, in the human host. Now this virus got really somehow some new screws, let me say, and it got better attached, and this increased a lot its potential for propagation. But there is a good news. This is a bad news, of course, because it got this possibility for mutation to get better attached with these speckles. But the good news is that on the other side, it got a level of lethality inferior than he had before. And this was good news. So we think lethality for studies which are made are somehow around 0.6, 0.7, most of it 1%, which is not bad, let me say. If we look to SARS-CoV, to the first SARS-CoV or to MERS, this level much higher. Now, about vaccines. Well, this is a huge discussion. I'm not going to go through really too much, at least now, if not to take too much time to our viewers and listeners. But I tell you the following. First of all, I'm a parasitologist, really, and there is no vaccine for any parasitological disease, to tell you this first of all. But we are with the virus. In a certain way, a virus is a parasite because to survive, it needs the machinery of the cells of an host. So it is somehow a parasite. Well, let me see. At the moment, not all true is being said to the community. I think many people is confused also. And again, there are interests here behind that we have to stress. First, at the moment, to date, tomorrow, yesterday, till yesterday, there were 146 vaccine projects running, inscribed in the WHO, in the World Health Organization. And from those 146 projects, there are, let me say, some 10 which are ahead, let me say, of all of them. In fact, there are 3 great groups of vaccines in this first 10. First one which is a vaccine made of an inactivated virus, with or without adjuvant. An adjuvant is a substance which is added to enhance the immune response. And this inactivated virus, this is the technology which is already known for other viruses, like the flu, for example, vaccine. It is made with the same technology. It is an easier technology, despite the fact that to fabricate this virus, you need a lot of eggs because they proliferate inside the eggs. And this would be an huge amount of vaccines we would need to do that. But still, that is going on. That is one of the ways you can do this vaccine. In Brazil, we have one of these projects is now running since yesterday. Is the Sinovac vaccine made in China, and with Butantan Institute, they did a joint adventure, and they are now in phase 3, beginning of phase 3 of this vaccine. I will explain what the phases are because that's another amazing story. Then we have other 2, let me say, major new technologies of vaccine making, which we never did before. We don't know what can happen. One is a vaccine about RNA messenger vaccine, and these are the vaccines which are the biotech, for example, is working with that vaccine, and some others, but they're still a bit behind. And then you have maybe the one which is ahead of all, the famous Oxford vaccine, which has which has is in a joint adventure with AstraZeneca, and this vaccine, which is a vaccine which is made with an adenovirus. So, in fact, the technique is that you cut a little bit of the genome, the antigenic genome, the speckle of the virus, of the coronavirus, into this adenovirus, and then you make this vaccine from there. These two vaccines, the Sinovac and the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, they are now in Brazil. In a way, we are very proud to have these vaccine experiments here, but on the other hand, we should be really sad because they are doing the vaccines here. I mean, they are experimenting now in this phase, the clinical trial here in Brazil, because the situation is very bad. But I just want to stress one thing before I finish here. Despite the fact of the vaccine situation, there are some misunderstanding information to the population. A vaccine is a very difficult thing to do. Just to tell you, just for you to have an idea, the vaccine which was quicker made was the vaccine to Ebola. It took 5 years to be made, 5 years. Vaccines, they have 5 stages. They have to undergo 5 stages. The first stage is the target stage, is when you have to find a host to see if the virus will proliferate in there. So you have this, or you can make it also in vitro. And then you have the clinical phases, the clinical trials. And there are 4 clinical trials you have to make. You have to make one first for safety, then you have to make another one in a bigger population already to see if the person, when he gets the vaccine, it will get immunity, somehow it will get an answer. It will get an answer with this. It will build up an immune system answer. And then you have the 4th phase, when you have to have a large amount of people, and where you need in that to know if you get protected of this. You have to have people who never had the disease and which are going to be exposed, is vaccinated and is exposed to the virus to see if it doesn't get sick. And then you have the last, which is, believe, the most difficult one, which is the fabrication of the virus. And then you're going to need billions of vaccines. Imagine, for example, if there are mutations and we just build up an immune system profile for 3 months or 6 months, everybody has to be re-vaccinated. So we will need 3 times more vaccines. So it is a huge field. We can leave it for other day. If possible, this discussion, I will have all the pleasure to answer to it, but I don't want to get too much time here. Also, I want to hear more people talking more. I hope I answered the question which was asked.
Yes, and I really appreciate that. So I really appreciate it, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people do appreciate it as well, like what you just talked about, because one of the most common questions that we hear people talking, that we hear people asking is why there is no vaccine. You know, what is it? What are these researchers doing that there is no vaccines? Come on, they got to do something about that. But it's just not that easy. You know, you just explained here that in order for vaccine to be ready to be distributed to the population, I mean, there are 5 stages that this process takes, right? So, and I imagine each one of these stages take a little bit of time. So, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people can appreciate that answer. And thank you. That was very, very good. Richard, I would like to get you back here because I want to talk a little bit about a topic that is very interesting and very sensitive as well. And there's actually a question here for you, Richard, that I'm going to be asking you in a second. Richard, are you there? Yes? Okay, very nice. So, Richard, this is a very delicate subject, I know, but what we're seeing is like every single country across the world, the majority of the population really can see the challenges faced by the health professionals, by doctors and nurses, especially in this. And it's almost like when we see a doctor that is going through a health problem, or even a doctor or a nurse that dies as a consequence of the COVID. It's heartbreaking because it's almost like we're losing our soldiers. Like we from what I can remember, we never needed doctors and nurses so much as we do right now, and and I believe it's very challenging for you guys. For you guys, you are a doctor, as I said before, and for nurses as well, to go through this entire situations. You have families, and you at the same time you have to do your job, and everybody appreciates what you guys are doing, but the doctors and the nurses in the front line of the pandemic. As I said, this is a little bit of a delicate question, but is the country, is our country, Brazil, is Brazil ready to protect the doctors and nurses in the front line of the pandemic? Are we ready to protect our soldiers in this pandemic? Are we doing a good job with that?
Well, Junior, I truly agree that we are prepared. We are following all the instructions provided by World Health Organization, and also all the instructions that we could recognize in the most important papers that are published in literature. The problem that we have is that sometimes in the beginning of the pandemics, that everything was very hard to buy. For example, to buy the masks, to buy the coats. So we had some problems in getting the stuff to the hospitals, because as the pandemics, it was more important in other countries before it came to Brazil. So most of the tools, most of the equipments, they were already being sold to other countries. So it was very difficult to hire them for us. So this was the big problem in the beginning. Also, I mean, we were used to use those equipments and protective tools in a wrong manner, because as we didn't have this situation before. For example, we used to use once and threw it out and threw it in the trash. So we were not used to keeping it, and we are not used to make the how can I say, the sustained use of those equipments. And now we had learned this, and now we are using the equipments in a more sustained way, in a more uh, in a way that we can really have all the equipments available, and with security, in a safety manner, So the thing is that sometimes, because people were not realizing this, the impact of this protection, the cost of all of this. So perhaps in the beginning, this was not so easy to be structured. But now that we are now more used to the situation, now that we were more used to the how to take care of the guys with this disease, now that we have seen how people get contaminated, so I think we are doing a good job. Also, we had some help. We have people from the engineering and those areas that try to do lots of things in order to increase our protections. So, for example, they try to make low cost equipment. They try to adapt the equipment to the reality of what we were facing, because sometimes when you use the normal equipment, it's not so easy. For example, when you're doing an intubation, when you're taking care or doing some procedure, so it was sometimes we need to adapt it. So the people from engineering and other areas, they try to help us in order to to make those equipments better, and more, how can I say, more adapted to our reality,
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Richard. And on top of that, I believe the routine of the doctors and nurses, the professionals in general, especially in the front line of the pandemic, it has to be very challenging, especially for their families, because at the same time that they have to help the entire country, they have also to return to their families and look at their kids and have dinner with their kids, or and I believe it's a very exhausting routine that health professionals, doctors and nurses mainly, are going through right now, especially, right? Because and I can only imagine how tough mentally this challenge is being for the medical community in general.
Yes, I think it's for everybody who works in the hospitals. We have doctors, we have nurses, we have physical therapists, we have the guys who clean the hospitals. I mean, we have the nutritionists, and we have the whole setting of professionals who work at the hospital. So all of them, all of us actually, we are being stressed with the situation, and we have always two concerns. The first one is the we are every all the time worried to get infected. So this is a very difficult situation once we are taking care of the guys and we're seeing what's going on, the seriousness of the disease, the impact of the complications. So it's a very, very difficult time. And there's one thing that is very interesting, mainly for doctors, is that most of us, we are like, we are paid not as official employee. I would say we don't have we have in Brazil this registered employee, because most of the our jobs we work like as companies. So we are like independent. So when we work, we earn. When we don't work, we don't earn. So another thing is that we are always worried if I become, for example, ill, I will not get my money because I do not have all the benefits that the registered employees have. So this is one thing. And the other thing is we are worried in taking the disease to home and to infect our relatives and parents. So usually most of us have old people living with us, or we have old parents, or we have people from the risk group. So all the time we're worried with that.
Okay, thank you very much. That there was a very heartfelt answer, and looking from the outside, as I said before, we can only imagine um, how tough it's been for you guys, for the health professionals, especially doctors and nurses, to deal with this entire situation. As I said, I believe it's a big mental challenge. When you spend your day in the hospital, eventually surrounded by COVID-19 patients who need your help, but at the same time, when your shift is over, you're gonna have to go back home to your family and still sit at the table with your kids, if that's the case, or with your relatives. And I believe this period of time has been especially challenging for doctors. And as I said, also we do appreciate the job that you guys are doing, because at this very moment you guys are the frontline soldiers. So you guys would be related to the Marines. You are in the front line. You are the ones who are protecting us, and I'm pretty sure I can say a thank you in name of other people as well that do appreciate everything that you guys are doing. So I would like to bring both Richard and Saul back here, because there's some questions here about about vaccines, and also a question about the chloroquine and the ivermectin. Um, I would like to start, and I'm not gonna address the question to any of you guys. If Saul wants to talk about, sure, because I believe Saul has more to do with this vaccination thing. Saul, what is it to do with India producing vaccines here? Like, there's a question here saying that is it true that the entire world depends on India to produce vaccines, and that won't be different for the COVID vaccines? Do you guys, what can you guys say about that?
Well, in fact, India has tradition in producing vaccines, but we have to see that at the moment, most interesting projects of developing vaccines are in other countries, especially in the United States, in China, in England. Nevertheless, also in Switzerland and in France and Germany. Nevertheless, we shouldn't forget that to make this vaccine is first you have to get a good product, but the problem is distribution, and this is step number 5, and it can take a long time to do that because you need billions, and that's where India plays a major role, because India has some plants where they can develop these very millions per day of this vaccine. That's why India is so important in this. So again, we need to work together. If the world doesn't go together, it is impossible to go through and to prevail.
Great, thank you very much, Richard. Oh, sorry, Saul. And Richard, there was a question here from Gustavo Santos about the chloroquine and the ivermectin. What does it take for a doctor to prescribe the chloroquine and the ivermectin for a patient with COVID-19? I mean, we see a lot of that on television, and it's also a very confusing subject. So what are your thoughts on that? What can you tell us about that?
Well, when you talk about those drugs, I mean, what we have is that in the beginning, we used to have, a small evidence, a small clinical evidence saying about good, some possible good effect of those drugs. And what we really had is that they're in, how can I say, not clinical studies, but in experiments and examples, for example, in cells experiments, they showed that the virus could be inactivated. I mean, the replication of the virus could be stopped. But the problem is that clinically we still do not have a very important study saying that they have all these impacts. I mean, so in the beginning, as we didn't have other studies, just a few ones saying that possible we could have a possible positive effect. I mean, as we had nothing else to do, so some guys tried to use those drugs in order to improve something. Because if you don't have anything and you still have a little, weak evidence because of the seriousness of the disease and the fear of everybody. So probably in the beginning, doctors used to advise using those drugs. The fact is that as time went on and more studies were performed, so we recognize that scientifically we do not have any evidence that those drugs may affect positively the treatment of the disease. The thing is that probably this good effect that was suspected in the beginning could be related to the guys that with this drug or without this drug would have could have um, uh, followed as the same way. So the great problem is that some of those drugs could have very important side effects. For example, chloroquine can produce heart problems and even heart stop. So why am I going to prescribe medication that there is no scientific evidence that it's going to really function in preventing something from the disease. And on the contrary, I know, and I still know, and I'm sure that this medication is going to give lots of problems. So it's not worthy to do that. So that's why if you have a look at the scientific evidences, we do not have an indication to use those medications in people. One thing that is very important to know is that when we do studies to say, well, this medication is good, well, everybody, it's advisable that we use this medication. We have lots of types of studies that we have to follow. So we have to do double-blinded studies to see if the results are really clinically are really significant. We have some studies that we see, for example, how many people should be treated in order for me to find the benefits of this medication. So all of those kinds of studies should be made so that we can say, well, I'm completely sure we have a strong evidence from literature that this medication is really nice and it should be used to treat some disease or another disease. So if you don't have all those evidences, mainly if you have the information and we already know the problems of those drugs, why I'm going to use them in clinical practice? So our first principle in medicine is first, do not make harm. So I don't want to add the problem to a person using a medication that we are not sure about its effect.
And just to wrap up, from what I understand in the beginning, of course, everybody was desperate to find a solution for the problem in the beginning of the pandemic, and eventually some people who did take the chloroquine, they made use, and they saw some positive results in terms of the replication of the virus. So, and everybody got very excited and let's use this drug, but eventually there was no studies back at the time in terms of the side effects, right, of this of this drug, and now everybody's kind of weighing what is the real benefit of this drug. Is it really effective, and what are the side effects? So that's why now the talk about this specific drug has like, we don't talk about it as much as we used to 2 months ago, right? Because it just seems to be not very effective, and people don't seem, the doctor seems to not understand the real side effects, right?
Yes, because everything is very new. And the one thing is that in the beginning, when everybody was worried and we even didn't know how the disease was going to be, it's in the very beginning of it. So people said, okay, most of the hospitals, they didn't say, no, everybody should use it. But you had well, if you think you would like to use, okay, it's not forbidden, because we have a very weak evidence, but we have a weak evidence, and we didn't have any other evidence of that the medication is not going to function. So because of the process, because of the situation, because of the seriousness of the complications. So in the very beginning of the disease, people said, okay, it's not. I mean, we are not sure, but because of all of this situation, sometimes we are going to try. But at the moment that we know that there is no scientific evidence for good results, we have no reason. We have no. There is not just how can I say, arguments for you to use them. And one thing that should be very clear is that, for example, I'm a heart surgeon and I work in the ICU. but I'm not an infective a doctor who is a specialist in infectious disease. I'm not a pharmacologist. I'm not an epidemiologist. So it's very important that things that was going on right now is that everybody is thinking that is able to say things about everything, but it's not true. When I have some infectious disease problem, I work and I ask and I consult the specialist of that area. So I have to take lots of care because each specialty has lots of points, lots of very special concerns that somebody who is not from that specialty may not know exactly what's going on. For example, if I have somebody with a heart problem, okay, I am going to ask a doctor, but if I ask a cardiologist, probably this information would be much better than if I ask not a cardiology. And the same thing for the nephrologist and infectious disease, because it's very important to listen to the guy who has the experience to work with that subject. So that's what we have to take care.
Okay, Richard, I really appreciate your answer and the humbleness of your answer, of your response is very touching too, and I really appreciate this because and this has a little bit to do with my next question, which I'm gonna address to Saul. Basically, we're seeing on television that. How can I phrase this? A lot of people seem to know a lot of stuff, but I don't want my lawyer doing a heart surgery on me. I don't. At the same time, I don't want my doctor to be my lawyer in court if I ever need one. I'm not gonna need one, but different people should be in their fields of knowledge doing what they know best, right? But it's not what we really see. I mean, the situation in Brazil seems to be a little bit chaotic in terms of information. And if you have a teenager, if you have a little kid who watches on television to a public speaker, for example, saying that there's nothing wrong or stuff like that, then this information can come in a very strong ways to a teenager's mind, because we know most kids and teenagers, they're little sponges, right? They suck the information that they see, they listen to what they hear, and they pay attention and they learn and they take it for granted. So my next question, so without getting into any specific names or whatever the case is, the question that I have for you is, well, you are an European man, and as I said, we were talking before, you are quite aware of both sides of the situation. You know what's going on in Brazil because you live in Brazil now. I know your family is in Brazil, but at the same time, you do have quite a lot of family, a lot of relatives back in Portugal, and I know you studied in different countries as well across Europe. So I know that you do have a lot of friends and that you talk to people to see what is the situation and the way things are going. But my question still is, a lot of people say that the authorities are not really doing what they're supposed to do. Protect the people and make sure that the pandemic does not spread as fast as it is spreading right now. Is this how bad is this in terms of numbers, in terms of contamination rates, of the contamination rate of the disease? What is the impact of what's being said on television, for example, or what the public authorities is saying? How does it impact the pandemic and the consequences of what are the consequences? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Junior, trying to answer your question, I will go a little bit back on the question you made to Richard, and to which he brilliantly answered. To tell you the following: a medicine we know that a proper medicine takes around 10 years to be ready. And 10 years in the life of a politician is a very long time. And politicians, they need to be elected and they depend from the happiness of their people. So for politicians to find a medicine that it works straight away like a miracle, that is the karma. That is the thing which will bring him in power, definitely, because that's what he wants. So there is a tendency, not here only in Brazil, but all over the world, of politicians to try to get as much as they can already used drugs. And that's what happens with chloroquine and ivermectin, which are drugs used to fight, amazingly, against parasites. One against malaria, especially, and the other one against other parasites, metosvarians like Onchocerca volvulus, and for example. So politicians, they have this tendency for try to get this miracles thing happening so they can assure their election. And what we see here is, in fact, the big mistake we are doing is this politicization of this virus. And this is happening, my friend, not only in Brazil, it's happening all over the world a little bit. And that is what is worrying the World Health Organization. This politicization of the virus is a very dangerous thing because, as I told you, the virus, he has no party. The virus, he has no soul. He has no club. He is very specifically intending to do his damage and to proliferate as much as he can. That's his survival. So this approach that we have now, first of all, you saw that we couldn't yet approach the problem between economics and health. And these are things which should be treated together and not apart, as we have been seeing. It seems that some of the people want to open everything and the other people want to close everything. So it seems that we are not listening to each other. And this is the approach that we have to have. We have to listen to each other. We have to sit down. In Brazil, there is a huge problem going on. We cannot have politicians in power, like governments and also governors and prefects, each one acting aside. They have to sit down. As long as they sit down, I think consequences will be very good for the population. I'm completely sure. And of course, we have to follow the rules of the World Health Organization. It is not, you see, to be a technician, to be a scientist in the World Health Organization, you have to be very good. It's not everybody who is there. It's the better guys in science which are there, at least as consultants. So we have to listen to them. Even if they don't have all the answers, they have the better ideas. And one of the things we have to follow now is 3 important things we have to put on the head of everybody. Social distancing, washing hands, and use masks. We have to do this. If we don't do this, numbers will always rise. Everywhere will always appear a certain focus, and then more people get infected. And we know that when the number of cases, that 1% of these cases will die, people will die. That's the lethality index, and we know this rate very well. So we have to do this. Now, I believe that if we do this, numbers will go a little down, a lot down, and probably we can live till the vaccine is going to appear. So till there, I think that's the only thing we can do. But we need to be together. We need to forget political differences and be together.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So thank you for your answer. I have another question that one of the viewers sent. And I believe this is a little bit of the $1 million question too. It's the second $1 million question because you already mentioned the first one. What would be the forecast for when the quarantine ends? Like when is everybody going to be able to go back home? This question is interesting because I think everybody is out home. Like most people are out on the streets already, which is a problem. But officially speaking, when will this? What do the algorithms and eventually the predictions, the positive or the negative, the pessimistic or the optimistic forecast. What do you think about that? When will people go back home, go back to the streets, and have normal lives again? What are your thoughts?
Well, of course, it is a 1 million question. But what I can say really, looking to the studies, looking to the profile of pandemics, looking to the history we already had pandemics before. We had the flu, the Spanish flu in 1918, last century. Looking to everything, and we cannot exclude a second wave. I have to tell you the following: as long as we don't have a vaccine, and I tell you, the vaccine will always be ready by the end of next year. So probably first people which is going to be vaccinated are going to be the medical staff, what is understandable. They deal with the patients, so they should be immunized first. But probably only in 2022 we will have a vaccine, and it will. We hope it will work because we don't even know that. So what I think, but this is theoretically what I think. I have two feelings, let me say, a bit scientific based feelings. First of all, I think everything indicates that this virus is a seasonal virus. What does this mean? Seasonal virus. It means is a virus which obeys, like other coronavirus, to flu patterns. And this means that during winter is active and during summer is not active. So we are now passing winter here. And as soon as winter is gone, the number of cases will go down a lot and we will be able to get out. I think probably from October on, we will be able to get on the streets, and probably in December, we will be able to develop all activities. But attention, using masks is going to be all the time needed, washing hands, because focus will rise. We see this already in Europe. They are opening. They did lockdown in winter. They did their job in winter. Now they got out. They are out. But they have focus everywhere, which they have to fight. What they do, people are with using masks, washing their hands. They're on the street. But when a focus appear, they go, they test, and they isolate. And that's how we have to go till the appearance of a vaccine. So to tell you, this is, I think the virus is a seasonal virus, like the flu virus. Another thing I think, which is something we don't know yet, is that I would use here a new term like eugenetic virus. This means we don't know why, but certain people develop an immune response which works against the person when it fights. It's called the cytokine storm that produces a huge inflammation in the body, which brings a lot of systemic problems, and the individual ends up with a very severe and sometimes with a fatal destiny, dying. And we don't know why this happens. Probably because there are genetic inducing mechanisms to this to happen. So this virus is, I think, eugenetic and also is seasonal. We have to wait and see what's going on, what's going to happen.
Thank you, Saul. And gentlemen, we are almost an hour and 30 minutes through this live, and I want to start making the final considerations here, the final thanks, and I really appreciate your availability, both of you guys' availability for being here and answering these questions and giving your thoughts on this insane situation. I can call it insane that we're going through, and I believe a lot of the questions that you guys covered were big questions for most people, and I just want to ask you guys to make some final considerations. Like, of course, Richard, you more on the clinical side, and you, Saul, on the technical side, and it's just one final question that I have, Richard. lot of people talk about the health facilities in Brazil, and the situation of the health system is overloaded. There's no room for any extra patients. Um, how do you see this for in the next few months? Have we already reached the plateau of the pandemic, and that things are eventually going to go better now? And what are your thoughts? Like, how do you envision the next few months? And thank you once again for being here, Richard.
Well, Junior, I would thank you for the invitation. And I think that depends on the part of the country. For example, I think in São Paulo, and this time we are reaching, or we have reached the plateau, and hopefully, if things go okay, we can start to go down. Our main concern is about the fact that the government in São Paulo, they opened everything, so we have to still wait for the next 2 months, 2 weeks, what's going to happen. But the problem is that in most parts of the country, the governments, they are opening the things, the places, and people are staying less in home. So perhaps this could influence the curve. So we have to wait. I think we still have to wait. Of course, we are seeing in some places the decrease of the number of people in hospitals. We are seeing the increase in the number of free beds in the ICUs. But I think it is still, we have to take care not to think everything is okay, and then afterwards things become worse. And despite the fact, we are not everybody can understand the virus, can see it. It's very important for us to continue taking care, because everything could change in 1 or 2 weeks. So we have to continue to try to avoid, just leave, go out, leave our house, just for very important things. If we can stay at home, stay at home. Wash your hands all the time. Don't put your hands on your mouth, nose, or eyes without washing it before, or using alcohol. And when you go out, use mask. Don't stay without mask, because it's a way of protecting not just yourself but protecting the other ones. So this time we cannot be we cannot just think about ourselves. We have to think about everybody, and this is a moment that we have to be generous with everyone. So take care and continue to protect yourself and protecting all the people you love.
Saul,
Well, my message,
any final comments?
my final comments. Look, we can now assist what is going on in United States, for example, and we see that all those places where flexibilization was maximized, and now the number of cases are rising a lot, and the country is really passing through a very difficult time and very difficult period. Here in Brazil, well, first of all, talk about Portugal, ones that are Portuguese people which may be listening to us. In Portugal, Portugal did a very good job in the beginning. In fact, despite the fact that they did take a little bit time to close the borders, nevertheless, they did a quarantine very well done, almost lockdown in some places. In fact, the people especially had a very good answer to this. There was also political, the people got very friendly with each other, the political parties all together in the same boat. So that was very important to achieve the in fact, what they did. And so the plateau in Portugal is a plateau where you have around maximal 10 deaths to 1 deaths per day. I mean, what is good? Of course, every death is a sad thing, but we have to see that plateaus do this. Depend on the work you do with the quarantines and social distance, then you have the plateau accordingly. So why you have such a long plateau in São Paulo? Because it took some time till you got measures. When you get measures later on 2 weeks, then you get the plateau. Now he is in this plateau. But the problem, like I was saying about Portugal still, now we are in Portugal is summer. So as I told you, this is a seasonal virus, I think, like the coronavirus. And because of it, now you don't have so many cases. You have controlled cases and you have some focus, which of course the authorities go there, they test and they control and they isolate the positive cases. So to date is okay, despite if it comes a second wave, which we don't know. But I'm almost completely sure that in October, when the winter is going to return, we will see rising numbers again. Once the virus, he needs to get 70% of the population. So we know that. And there is no vaccine and no treatment. So it will come back. Here in Brazil, well, Brazil is not a country, it's a continent. So we have different pictures. We saw in the north a lot of troubles. And now we know that, for example, we have 5 districts, provinces, which numbers are going down. So the pandemic is slowing down very much, like Pará, for example, is going down. Acre is going down. Then you have another some 10 states where the pandemic is in the plateau, like Sergipe, for example, from where we're talking about now. The place we are now is in the plateau, I suppose. Probably it will be for some time, because we didn't do lockdown. So we will assist every day to some a certain number of deaths, what is not good. And then you have the south, and here comes the big trouble. The south is going to come into winter. So you see already places like Santa Catarina or Rio Grande do Sul rising a lot, the numbers. They didn't do lockdown in the beginning. But the good news is that they have good health systems there. So they have good support. So people can straight away look for medical care and help as soon as they start with the first symptoms. So to finish, and I want to thanks to all of you, to you both for sure, for the brilliant performance you had. I want to thanks for this invitation also, Junior, to you as our host. I want to thanks to everybody which had the patience to assist to our conversation here and to hear our opinions. I hope they look them more as arguments and not as opinions, as a matter of fact. And I want to resume this with one phrase, which is apart but together we will prevail.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, and thanks for everybody who took the time to watch our talk. And it's much appreciated. And if you have any following questions to Richard and to Saul, this live is going to be on YouTube, so you guys can post your comments, and I'll be checking them every once in a while, and we can surely try to answer your questions after. Thank you so much, people, and be safe and enjoy your days. Bye-bye.